I grew up on the west side. It's a street called Turnus. It's between Lanio and Central off of Michigan Avenue. It was a very diverse community with very few African Americans, and it's still very diverse with very few African Americans in the area. When I came up, the elementary school I went to was O.W. Holmes, and there was just a few African American students, and I think I probably was one, maybe the only one in each of my classes. But I got a lot of support and encouragement. I always loved to read, so I was always a very good student and had a lot of positive reinforcement. My first and second grade teachers are still alive. Miss Bittner was my first grade teacher, and Miss Flecksteiner was my second grade. And I've kept in touch with them over the years. They're now in their advanced years, but still very articulate and alert. And I had a chance to have lunch with them a couple of years ago. Took them flowers on behalf of all the students who did not have the chance to come back and thank them. But I still have it's the instrument where it's a toy where you put in a disc and you flip it. And so I'm skipping on the name of it, but I won that as the best reader in first grade. So I still have that. And my second grade teacher, Ms. Flecksteiner, she would come back in the fall and share her stories about her trips. She always loved to travel. So my undergrad degree was in elementary ed, and it was, I think, based on such a positive role model that she formed for me. So even though I never taught, I was encouraged growing up in Detroit through my elementary school, and I went to Munger Junior High. It was called Junior High back then, which was attached to Chadsey High School, and went to Cass Tech for my high school experience in Detroit. So my whole undergrad, my whole basic elementary, junior high, and high school experience were in Detroit. Very positive. Had a lot of positive reinforcement from teachers. I went to Wayne because I was the first in my family. I'm one of four, the oldest girl. And I was the first in the family to go to a four-year college. And so after I graduated, and it was natural, I stayed at home. I thought about looking at higher ed in other places other than staying at home and going to school. But my father worked in the factory, Chevrolet Gear and Axle, and he felt, why spend money to go away to school? You can stay home, work part-time, work part-time or whatever you need in order to get a good education locally. And so because I was the first in the family, even though a few people I knew had gone away to school, and I visited a few campuses of people that I knew, my father wasn't willing or chose not to fill out financial aid forms and things of that because he just felt it was getting too much in the personal business. And because he had paid for everything as he went along, there was no debt. And so he felt I wouldn't qualify for any aid. And with my limited experience and background, I didn't know how to pursue that further. But when it came to graduate school, I was an older student, non-traditional. I went back in my 30s. I had initially worked for General Motors, starting at the Chevrolet Gear and Axle plant on Holbrook Street. And then I just was not content, even though, I made some milestones there. I was the very first African-American executive secretary there at Chevrolet Gear and Axle. I kept telling them I want to help people. So, they would promote me or put me in different positions, but it just wasn't satisfying that urge to to help me feel like I was making a significant difference. So I worked for GM for 8 years, and my last job was at the General Motors Tech Center, and I was putting out a newsletter. And so I developed a cough, and I would talk to my cousin who was living on the East Coast at that time, and he was saying, Clarita, I have a cough too. And his turned out to be cancer, lung cancer. He was a smoker, and he had passed within a year. And with me, it was an autoimmune disorder. But it gave me a sort of a wake-up call that I started reading books about imbalance, that sometimes illness shows up, not just, oh, it just shows up, but sometimes it's an imbalance in areas of your life, like your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. And so I looked at my life at that point, and that was in '84, and said, okay, your money, you're making pretty good money. You're upholding the race in terms of being in a General Motors corporate setting. But how are you happy? And I wasn't. And so a friend of mine had come to U of M to the School of Social Work. And I was helping him back then typing papers for him. It was before word processing and things became popular. And I said, now, I didn't write his papers, but he was from South Africa. And I said, if he can come here from South Africa, get into a graduate program, and pursue his interest was in community organization, then, maybe this is something I should look at pursuing. So the long about way to tell you is someone I knew was in the graduate program, and I was helping him in learning about the field of social work by typing up his papers for him. And so I went for an interview, and the day I happened to go to the School of Social Work, they were having alumni come in and talk about their fields, their careers in the fields. And so I ended up applying at U of M for their 85, 86 class. The program was a 16-month program. I also applied at Wayne, but I got significant financial support at that time from the School of Social Work. Plus, I made connections, like the dean at that time was Harold Johnson, who had a background in gerontology, and my area of interest was working with older people, or going back to industry and helping to make a difference with, the other needs of employees other than just their work environment, but other needs that they may have within the work environment. And so I was admitted and was at U of M in the School of Social Work between September of '85 and graduated in December of '86. Social work looks at the individual within their environment. It just doesn't say, okay, this person may have a challenge. Let's just work on him. Let's just focus our attention on her. But it looks at all the other aspects of an individual. What is the home life? What's their family life? What community do they live in? How are these other outside forces? Do they have a job? It depends on the nature of what's going on. But it looks at the individual within their environment. And that, to me, made a lot of sense. Because, again, looking at balance in life, that if you see someone, they're made up of they're multifaceted. And so people, when you're dealing with helping them move forward, helping communities move forward, you have to look at the whole picture. And so social work does that. And also in the field, there's many directions you can go in. They're just not the stereotypical way of looking at social work as they go into people's homes and try to take away their kids, or they're looking under beds or what have you. My area of focus was administration with a minor in interpersonal practice. And so interpersonal practice is where you would find the counseling, of individuals or families or groups. And so that was my main focus. I thought I would want to be more of an administrative role. So that was the area of my major focus. There's also community organization within social work for people who have an interest in impacting on communities, as activists or going in as just trying to make change on a larger scope. And so there's also people who have an interest in research and evaluation. They want to see what's been done and how can we do things differently and have a basis for making those decisions. So the field has a wide scope. And so I thought that was the beauty of the field, that you could go into one arena and say, okay, I've done this for a while, let me switch into something else. And so that's the way my career also has shaped up. Well, it's interesting because I was early 30s when I came into the master's program and considered non-traditional. I was renting a home for my parents in Detroit, and I also found a place in Ann Arbor, boarding in a woman's home near North Campus for a couple of days a week. So I really didn't stay on campus as a full-time student because part of the MSW program has internships, and I had to fulfill requirements in both my administration major and my interpersonal minor. And so the major aspect, the administration major, I fulfilled at the hydromatic plant in Ypsilanti. So on those days, I stayed close to campus. Other days, I did my field placement at the Detroit Area Agency on Aging in their Older Workers Program. And so those days, I could stay in my house that I was renting for my parents in Detroit. And so I was really torn between living, although I was a student at U of M, I was living in two places. And so depending on the day of the week or when classes were going on campus, or I had an internship, that determined where I would spend my nights. So it was kind of a hectic experience. So I wasn't the typical, and so part of me missed the experience of being on campus as an undergrad and getting caught up in the rah. Even though I have an affiliation, and I still work now back at the U of M, I have that affiliation. It just wasn't, I grew up with it as a teenager. It didn't start until I was in my 30s, and a commuting student and staying on campus part-time sort of had me going in two different directions while meeting my needs. Yeah, my first experience, one of the reason I was also attracted to U of M, I used to go to the art fairs in the summertime, and I imagined what would it be like to be a student on this campus, not realizing that some years later I would be a student on the campus. So it's like sometimes we plant those thoughts in our minds, and what would it be like, and then sometimes we're able to fulfill those dreams, not knowing that sometimes the steps we're taking will eventually get us to realizing something. Then you look around and say, yeah, I am here as a student. But it started with the art fairs, was my first exposure to Ann Arbor's campus. Yes, many of our students are busy because the graduate program for advanced standing students who are coming already with a bachelor's in social work, they come through in 12 months. My program was 16 months, where you go straight through for 4 semesters, and some people do fall, summer, winter to break it up. But I went straight through. So yeah, I was a good student. I did well in my classes, but I was also on medication at that time over working with that autoimmune disorder that that had been discovered. And so some of the faculty were kind enough in order to give me some incompletes, because of some of the medication I was on had an effect that would deal with concentration issues. So I was a good student, but I was a student who again was an older student dealing with living on campus and off campus, and also overcoming a health opportunity at that time. I think it should continue to provide places for conversation and openness, for collaborations, where a project is going on in Detroit, because there's so much expertise and research, and people, I think, have a commitment. Perhaps finding ways where faculty are rewarded for grants and research projects and things where they can tie in what they're doing with projects and undertakings in the city, or looking at problems in the city And having, sometimes it takes a reward system, that it's not enough to say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if a group of us went down and helped Detroit, but if it has to be part of the fundamental way of how maybe perhaps faculty are being evaluated and rewarded. Also, as I say, in our school, that there are many students who are part of initiatives that they receive scholarship funding for different projects that are Detroit based, or based in inner cities. And so again, the attraction then is, okay, financial support, pay my tuition, get some grant support to help me get my education. Okay, I'll go work with these communities. So part of it has to be sometimes the bait in order to get those things happening. But I think opportunities where there can be collaboration between faculty, staff opportunities where people like our alumni, they have like alumni day, and they'll have our school has them come and work in different community centers or in schools, and so it's a way for alumni to get together, but they're doing something good and they're doing something in the community. So it's creating opportunities, I think, and so I see it going on, but I think much more can continue to go on. But again, listening to the people in Detroit, what are their needs, bring them to the table, hear what they have to say, and then finding ways that it can be supported at the university through grant funding projects, research, and not just research for the sake of research, but applied research. And then write up those things that are succeeding. So I'm excited about the potential, and I've seen growth since coming from a student in the 80s to now as a staff person working back at the university. In terms of the School of Social Work, I can't speak much to the broader campus, but we have a program that sort of feeds into the School of Social Work called CAS, and they do projects and have experiences in Detroit and in inner cities, and I think that's good and need to continue. Just like as we branch out into international opportunities to get to know people again who are abroad are more like us than different. So of course we have different cultures and different ways we do things, but at the core, we are all human. We are all our brothers and sisters, and we're all on this one planet, and we need to take care of the planet as well as take care of each other. I would say have an open mind, be willing to meet people that are different than you, listen more than talking sometimes, observe more than acting sometimes, and then also be probably introspective. That sometimes in our society is such fast pace that sometimes students can be very reactionary, but sometimes it's like listening, observing, and being introspective about what's going on, and finding opportunities and ways to making themselves uncomfortable by stretching. That we really do most of our growth when we put ourselves into challenging opportunities. And so I think and also realizing that anything is possible, and really believing that if you want change, that you can be part of the change and not just feel defeated because of the way you see things are and you don't like them, but to feel that each person can make a step toward making a difference. But I think a big part is stretching out of your comfort zone and being willing to reach out to people that are different than you, and opportunities that may test you, but on the other side of it, you know that there will be growth and learning and opportunity, and not necessarily pick a career that's just based on, well, the statistics say the jobs are here and the money's here, but there has to be some type of balance between who you are at your core in terms of you show up in terms of your strengths and your interests, but also willing to grow in those areas where you're not strong, but focus more on your strengths and not so much on your weaknesses in terms of, I got to do better in this, I got to do better in this. Not that that may not be true, but see the glass as half full instead of half empty. See where your strengths are more so than where your weaknesses are. Build on those strengths in terms of career and opportunities, but also then once you get into the work world, try to collaborate with people who have the strengths that you don't.